Get ready for an adrenaline-fueled ride through the sun-scorched desert, where a determined delivery driver finds herself trapped by a ruthless biker gang and fights back using skills that only a former Delta Force operative could possess. In this thrilling saga, we witness how cunning strategy, courage, and an unbreakable spirit can overcome even the darkest obstacles. With roaring engines, high-stakes chases, and unexpected twists at every turn, this story promises action unlike anything you've seen before. Want to find out how our lone hero transforms from a seemingly ordinary driver into the desert's ultimate defender? Will her resourcefulness and grit be enough to break the bikers' stranglehold and deliver hope to a desperate town? Stay tuned to discover the jaw-dropping conclusion and share in this epic triumph of justice. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and follow us for more immersive, action-packed stories. Your support means everything. The midday sun scorched the endless expanse of the Mojave Desert, turning the cracked highway asphalt into something that shimmered like molten glass. Heat waves rippled in the distance, making scrubby cacti and scattered rocks appear to dance in a half-mirage. A solitary truck rumbled along the lonely stretch of road, its engine producing a weary drone. Dust trailed behind it in a fading plume, quickly swallowed by the vastness of the desert. Behind the wheel sat Evelyn Carter, a delivery driver on her weekly route. She wore a simple brown cap to shade her eyes, a sweat-stained t-shirt, and cargo pants that had seen better days. At first glance, everything about her seemed ordinary. A tired driver ferrying supplies to remote towns that rarely saw outsiders. Yet there was a certain grace to her movements, a deliberate precision in the way she gripped the steering wheel and checked her mirrors. That subtle control hinted at a past not defined by mundane long-haul drives. She kept the radio low, an old country station playing static-riddled tunes, and glanced at her watch. The desert always distorted time in its own strange way, but she knew she needed to be at the next gas station by afternoon to refuel and make her drop-off. Evelyn had traveled this route dozens of times before, but a slight prickling sense of unease tightened at the back of her neck. She couldn't quite place it, maybe the scorching heat or the hazy horizon. Maybe a memory from an older life. She tried to brush it off, but the feeling lingered. Pulling off at a weather-beaten sign that read, Ella's Outpost, 5 miles ahead, she noticed fresh motorcycle tracks on the dusty shoulder. Not entirely unusual, bikers passed through this remote highway from time to time, but these tracks were deep, indicating the bikes had been moving fast and in a pack. A small frown crossed Evelyn's face. She gently ran her fingertips over the steering wheel, drawing in a slow breath. Something about the configuration of those tire marks disturbed her, though she didn't fully understand why yet. Memories from years ago, from training sessions in an altogether different life, fluttered at the edges of her mind. She had once been part of a Delta Force unit, tasked with high-risk missions in hostile terrain. Back then, reading tracks was part of her everyday skill set, knowing how many people had crossed the area, what kind of equipment they carried, and what their intentions might be. She never imagined she'd find herself casually applying those skills out here as a simple delivery driver. But old habits die hard. She shook off the thought and pressed the gas, leaving the faint tire tracks behind. The desert air shimmered more intensely now. The interior of the truck grew hotter by the minute, but she had a schedule to keep. The outpost was just up ahead, a small cluster of buildings, barely more than a dusty diner, a gas pump, and a boarded-up souvenir shop. At least it offered shade and the possibility of cold water. Evelyn glanced in the rearview mirror. No one was behind her, but that nagging unease refused to dissipate. She tightened her jaw and told herself she was being paranoid. In the desert, instincts could be a lifesaver or a torment. She had to trust them, even if she couldn't yet see the threat. Ella's outpost turned out to be even quieter than usual. The dull squeak of the screen door was the only sign of life as Evelyn pushed it open and stepped inside the diner. A ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, stirring the stale, hot air. Booths with peeling vinyl lined the walls, and the place smelled of fried food and old coffee. She'd been here many times before, and it was typically run by Ella, a chatty, middle-aged woman who had inherited the establishment from her father. Today, Ella stood behind the counter with a tension in her face that Evelyn hadn't seen before. The older woman offered a faint smile but didn't say a word until Evelyn approached. "Afternoon," Evelyn said, forcing a polite grin. I'm a bit early on today's run. Ella nodded, glanced around as if to ensure no one else was listening, then spoke in a whisper. Heard some commotion on the highway earlier. Motorcycle gang tearing through. They didn't stop, but I'm not used to seeing so many. Evelyn's eyes shifted slightly. Yeah, I saw tracks. Ella leaned closer. Word is there's a new gang, or group of them, causing trouble around here. I've heard rumors. Small thefts, intimidation, that sort of thing. Folks are nervous. As if on cue, the bell above the door jingled. Evelyn turned to see a wiry man in a worn denim vest step inside. He had a patch on his chest that read Night Reapers. She recognized the skull emblem from news clippings and roadside graffiti. The man glanced at her, then at Ella. He managed a sneer that didn't quite become a full grin. Ella put on her customer service face, though her eyes trembled slightly. Can I get you something, sir? He tapped the counter with ring-covered fingers. A cold soda. He then threw a sidelong glance at Evelyn, sizing her up. His gaze lingered a moment too long, as if he were debating whether she posed any threat. From her outward appearance, dusty clothes, exhausted look, she probably seemed harmless. Evelyn returned the stare with polite indifference. She could sense tension radiating from him, like a coiled snake ready to strike. Part of her training told her to note every detail. His stance, the patch on his vest, the bulge that might be a concealed sidearm near his hip. She had no desire to escalate anything here, especially in a small diner where innocent people could be caught in the crossfire. He grabbed his soda can and strutted out, leaving behind an air of unease. Once the door shut, Ella let out a shaky breath. That's the third one I've seen today. They come in singles or pairs, scoping the place. I don't like it. Evelyn nodded, swallowing the apprehension that surged in her gut. I'm guessing it's not a coincidence. Might want to stay vigilant, Ella. She slipped a few bills onto the counter. For the coffee, and if you don't mind, I'll fill up my truck's tank. Outside, the desert sun was still blazing. Evelyn paid close attention to her surroundings as she moved to the gas pump. The open landscape offered no real place for an ambush, but she knew that if these bikers had a plan, they'd strike when it suited them. As she filled the tank, she felt eyes on her from the diner window. Whether it was Ella's concerned gaze or someone else's, she didn't look back. She just kept her mind on high alert, instincts tingling. She drove off a few minutes later with the uneasy feeling that whatever was brewing out here, this was only the beginning. Continuing along the desert highway, Evelyn replayed the recent encounter in her mind. She'd taken notice of the biker's tattoos, a stylized scorpion on his forearm and the Night Reapers emblem. As a Delta Force veteran, recognizing insignias and reading subtle cues had once been second nature. Her specialized training taught her to anticipate threats long before they manifested. The creeping tension in her gut told her these bikers were more than just a rowdy gang looking for a thrill. Soon she came upon a narrow, rickety bridge that crossed a dry ravine. The sun was lowering on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The desert light could be both magnificent and deceptive, creating illusions that tested even the most seasoned traveler. She slowed down to navigate the bridge carefully. The boards creaked ominously under the truck's weight, and a misturn here would result in a lethal drop into jagged rocks below. Halfway across, she spotted what looked like a figure standing at the far end. Her heart skipped a beat. The silhouette was tall and broad-shouldered, but the shifting desert light made it hard to discern details. Evelyn's mind raced. Was it a stranded motorist in need of help, or something more sinister? She brought the truck to a cautious stop about 20 feet from the figure. Rolling down her window, she called out, "You all right there?" The figure took a step forward. Now Evelyn could see he wore a leather jacket adorned with the same Night Reapers patches as the man in Ella's diner. He had a thick beard and mirrored sunglasses that hid his eyes. Tension arced through the air. "Got a flat," he said, gesturing vaguely toward a parked motorcycle that Evelyn couldn't see from her angle. "Any chance you got a spare tire or some tools?" Evelyn didn't have a spare motorcycle tire in her truck, just standard vehicle supplies. The man's question might have been innocent, but every instinct in her screamed caution. She surveyed the area, the ravine beneath the bridge, the distant horizon empty of traffic, and the fading sunlight that would soon plunge everything into twilight. "I can offer some basic tools," she said carefully, "but I don't have a bike tire." He shrugged. "Might help anyway." Something about his tone felt off, too casual, too rehearsed. Evelyn considered her options. She could step out, but that would put her at a disadvantage. She could also back up, but the narrow bridge made that risky. Her best bet might be to proceed slowly and keep an eye on him. She inched the truck forward. That's when she noticed two more figures appear to the far side of the ravine, each straddling motorcycles. This wasn't a random breakdown. They'd planned this. A sinking feeling gripped her gut as the first man stepped to the side, waving her forward with a sly grin. Evelyn's grip on the wheel tightened. She glanced in her side mirror and saw yet another biker approaching from behind. They were boxing her in on the bridge. She took a deep breath, forcing her pulse to steady. A chaotic rush of old training scenarios flooded her mind. Ambush tactics, how to break a perimeter, how to remain calm in the face of immediate threat. She had to think quickly. If she stayed put, she'd be cornered. If she tried to rush through, she risked losing control on the narrow pass. The truck engine idled, and for a moment, all she could hear was her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. Evelyn decided on a calculated move. Letting the engine rev higher, she surged the truck forward a few feet, forcing the bearded biker to jump aside or risk being pinned. He let out a startled curse, but this gave her a small window of space. The two bikers at the far end started their engines, presumably to block her path. Gritting her teeth, Evelyn pressed the accelerator harder. The truck roared, echoing across the empty ravine. The old wooden planks complained under the sudden shift in weight. She was gambling that the bikers wouldn't do anything too drastic while on such precarious ground. One of the bikers ahead sped toward her, revving his engine in a show of intimidation. At the last second, he swerved, nearly scraping the truck's side. Evelyn locked eyes with him, an instant of silent challenge. She kept her foot down, refusing to yield. The second biker, seeing that his partner had failed to block her completely, waved angrily but moved aside. With a jolt, the truck cleared the far side of the bridge. Behind her, she could hear shouts, frustrated curses cutting through the desert air. She risked a quick glance in the rearview mirror. The bearded man who'd pretended to have a flat kicked at the gravel, furious. She couldn't see him clearly anymore, but her ears caught the distant sound of bike engines revving in pursuit. Evelyn knew that on open desert roads, a group of determined bikers could easily catch up to a delivery truck. Her only advantage was the wide cargo bed, which might deter them from trying to flank her if she swerved. Still, she needed a plan. She wasn't just worried about herself. She had a load of essential supplies for the next settlement, and she wasn't about to let these thugs take that away. The highway stretched on in front of her, a ribbon of cracked asphalt surrounded by tumbleweeds and scattered boulders. The sun was dipping lower, painting the sky with streaks of fiery gold. Soon night would descend, and the desert would become a different beast altogether. A few minutes later, she saw two headlights gaining on her. She slammed her foot onto the gas pedal, but the truck could only go so fast, especially weighed down by cargo. The bikers drew alongside, one on each side of the truck, their menacing stares drilling into her. She spotted patches, tattoos, and glints of metal, likely weapons clipped to their belts or strapped to the bikes. One of them slapped the side of her truck, shouting over the roar of engines, "Pull over!" Evelyn didn't comply. She knew if she stopped now, they'd have every advantage. She hoped to outrun them to a wider section of road or a place where she could maneuver better. Despite her calm exterior, adrenaline pumped through her veins. Her mind raced through possible defensive strategies, hitting the brakes to force them forward, swerving to clip one bike at lower speeds, or leading them into a sandy area where their rides might lose traction. Her truck jolted as one biker kicked at the side. She swerved slightly, teeth clenched. She needed to end this chase on her terms. Right now, she was outnumbered and outpositioned, but she wasn't helpless. Her old instincts told her that if there was going to be a fight, she'd need terrain, timing, and the element of surprise. Evelyn spotted a dusty, hard-packed side road veering off to the right. She recognized it from her map checks, an old mining trail that led deeper into the hills. It wasn't ideal for a big truck, but it might be less ideal for speeding motorcycles. Weighing her options quickly, she decided to take the risk. She slammed the brakes just long enough for the bikers to pull slightly ahead, then cut the wheel hard and veered onto the side road. The tires kicked up a massive cloud of dust and gravel, momentarily obscuring her from the bikers' view. She heard them cursing, trying to pivot and follow. The trail was rough and uneven, with patches of sand and loose rock. The truck bounced violently, forcing Evelyn to grip the wheel with both hands to keep control. Still, her strategy began to pay off. One of the bikes fishtailed in the loose gravel, nearly toppling over. The other managed to keep up, albeit at a slower pace. She chanced a glance in the rearview mirror. The lead biker was navigating the terrain more carefully, but he was clearly determined. Behind him, the second biker was regrouping, revving the engine to try and catch up. Evelyn knew that if they kept pursuing, they might call more of their gang for backup. In open desert, she had very few places to hide. Twilight crept over the desert, turning the sky a deep orange fading into purple. Shadows lengthened, invisibility dropped. For someone untrained, this would be a nightmare. But for Evelyn, it signaled an opportunity. She recalled countless nights in harsh environments during her Delta Force days, missions that required stealth, endurance, and a keen understanding of how to use darkness to your advantage. The trail wound through a narrow pass between rocky outcroppings. Evelyn slowed the truck slightly, scanning the surroundings. She spotted a shallow canyon off to the left, essentially a dried-up riverbed that snaked around a formation of boulders. It could provide temporary cover if she needed to hide the truck. She pressed on, each bump in the road jarring her teeth. The first biker was closing in again, and now she could see more headlights in the distance behind him. Reinforcements. Her mind churned with possible tactics: lead them into the canyon and set up a defensive position, or try to double back to the main road and risk another ambush. In that moment, a memory surfaced, a survival exercise she'd done in a Middle Eastern desert, where her team had evaded hostile wave forces for nearly 48 hours by using natural cover and unpredictable movement. She couldn't replicate that entire scenario now, but the principles were the same. Never let the pursuers guess your next move, and use the environment to your advantage. Steeling herself, Evelyn made a split-second decision. She yanked the wheel toward the canyon, guiding the truck down into the dried riverbed. The sudden drop felt like she'd driven off a ledge. The truck's suspension groaned, and loose rocks sprayed from beneath the tires. Once she was partly hidden by the canyon walls, she cut the headlights, relying on the rapidly dimming twilight for cover. Her heart pounded. This was a dangerous gamble. If the bikers followed her in, she'd be boxed in. But if she could maneuver quietly enough to elude them, she might get a chance to slip away, at least temporarily. She reminded herself that she wasn't just some hapless driver. She was trained for situations like this. It was time to use every edge she had. The engine noise echoed off the canyon walls, making it hard to pinpoint exact locations. Evelyn killed the motor for a moment, listening intently. She heard the distant rumble of motorcycles above, but it sounded like they were hesitating. The rocky terrain and fading light must have given them pause. She took a slow, deliberate breath, scanning her surroundings. The canyon floor was strewn with boulders and patches of scrub. Tall walls rose on either side, their jagged formations casting deep shadows. Overhead, the first stars began to glitter against the darkening sky. Evelyn hopped out of the truck and carefully closed the door without making a sound. She grabbed a small flashlight from her glove compartment, along with a multi-tool and a compact first aid kit. She also retrieved a small folding shovel, a relic from her military days, stowed beneath the driver's seat. It wasn't much, but it could serve as a makeshift weapon if needed. She crouched low, creeping toward the canyon entrance where she'd driven in. Her boots made only the faintest crunch on the gravel. Training had ingrained in her a reflex for silent movement, heel to toe, avoiding dry branches, controlling her breathing. The memory of stealth missions came flooding back. Crouched behind a boulder, she peered upward. One biker had dismounted and stood at the canyon's edge, shining a flashlight down. The beam cut through the darkness in flickering arcs. Evelyn pressed herself flatter against the rock, heart pounding. If they spotted her or the truck, it could quickly turn into a deadly showdown. The biker said something she couldn't quite catch, likely calling to his comrades. She heard another engine rev, then idle. They seemed unsure whether to venture into the canyon. For a moment, Evelyn considered letting them come in. She might be able to set up an ambush, use the tight space to her advantage. But that plan was risky. She was outnumbered, and if they had firearms, a single slip-up could be fatal. A gust of wind hissed across the canyon floor, carrying the scent of desert sage. From the corner of her eye, Evelyn noticed a narrow path that led deeper into the labyrinth of rocks. If she could guide the truck through there, she might find a way around to another exit. But first, she had to confirm whether the bikers would follow or leave. After a tense minute, the flashlight above swung away, and she heard footsteps receding. The hum of the motorcycle grew louder, then faded. They were pulling back, for now, probably to gather more of their crew or find a better vantage point. Evelyn knew this was just a temporary reprieve. Sooner or later, they'd come in greater numbers, possibly with off-road vehicles. She exhaled slowly, returning to the truck. Her mind raced with possible next moves. Driving deeper into the canyon under the cover of darkness might buy her time, but it could also lead her into a dead end. Alternatively, she could wait until they left the immediate area and try to slip back to the highway. A surge of defiance stirred in her chest. She was tired of running from these thugs. Part of her wanted to confront them, show them they'd chosen the wrong target. But prudence won out. One against a gang wasn't a fair fight, even with her training. She'd need to be more strategic. Night settled over the desert like a slow curtain drop. The temperature began to plummet, and a chill wind rustled through the dry brush. Evelyn maneuvered the truck further into the canyon, using only her parking lights, just enough to see the rough outlines of the path. The canyon walls loomed overhead, jagged silhouettes against the moonlit sky. Eventually, she found a level spot tucked behind a large outcropping, where she parked and switched the engine off entirely. The place was naturally concealed. Someone would have to stumble right upon her to notice. She stepped out, scanning for any sign of approaching headlights or flickering beams of flashlights, but saw none. Evelyn rummaged through the cargo area. She had crates of non-perishable food, bottled water, some tools, and other sundries intended for the next settlement. Taking a bottle of water, she drank sparingly. Then she opened a crate that contained a few older items of hers, things she kept out of habit. She pulled out a battered metal case the size of a briefcase. Inside were remnants of her military life, a disassembled sidearm, extra magazines, and a small stock of ammo. She hadn't used the weapon in a long time, not since she started the delivery job. But out here with a biker gang on her trail, it might be the difference between life and death. She carefully assembled the handgun in the dim light, her fingers moving with the confidence of years of practice. Each piece clicked into place with a soft, metallic sound that resonated deep in her bones. She chambered around, then held the weapon at her side, feeling a mix of familiarity and dread. This was a step she didn't take lightly. Taking up arms again meant accepting the possibility of lethal conflict. Her mind raced through possible scenarios. If the bikers were serious about cornering her, they'd likely set up checkpoints or patrols near major exits from the desert. They might also scan the roads leading to nearby towns, hoping to intercept her. The canyon, though remote, might be her best bet for slipping away unseen, but it also posed its own risks: lack of clear escape routes, limited visibility, and the danger of natural obstacles. Evelyn exhaled a slow breath, forcing her adrenaline to subside. She needed rest, but she couldn't let her guard down completely. Setting the gun close at hand, she locked the truck and found a spot behind a rock ledge where she could keep watch. The wind gusted, rustling her hair and carrying the distant howls of coyotes. Her thoughts drifted to the people in the next settlement, who relied on these deliveries for basic necessities. She also thought of Ella, back at the diner, worried about a growing gang presence. A sense of responsibility gnawed at her. She was in a position to help, or at least to alert the authorities. But in these remote stretches, law enforcement often arrived too late, if at all. Despite the tension, she couldn't deny a part of her felt alive. The desert night reminded her of countless missions under starry skies, where every shadow could hide danger, yet also be used for cover. This was the reality she thought she'd left behind when she traded fatigues for cargo pants. But some skills, once acquired, never fade. As the moon rose higher, she vowed to use every ounce of her training to see this through. The bikers thought they'd cornered a simple delivery driver. They didn't realize they'd awakened a side of her that was ready for war. The night passed in a tense lull. Every rustle of wind against the canyon walls made Evelyn's nerves twitch. She dozed lightly, her back against a cool stone, one hand resting on her holstered handgun. The hours crept by with agonizing slowness. Sometime around midnight, she heard the faint sound of motorcycle engines in the far distance, but they never ventured close. Perhaps they were searching the main roads, expecting she'd try to escape under cover of darkness. At the first hint of dawn, the sky began to lighten. A faint glow illuminated the top edges of the canyon walls, revealing the rough textures and sharp crevices. Evelyn stood and stretched, her muscles stiff from the cramped position. Her breath came out in misty puffs. The desert could be deceivingly cold before sunrise. She carefully made her way back to the truck, which remained hidden in the shadow of a large rock overhang. After a quick check of her supplies, she rummaged through a crate and found a few energy bars. Chewing one, she contemplated her next move. She needed to find a way to either bypass the bikers entirely or confront them under circumstances that favored her. Memories of specialized training courses flashed through her mind: desert navigation, camouflage, setting traps. She recalled how her team once created diversions to lure enemies away from their objective. The idea of setting a decoy crossed her mind. Maybe she could rig something that looked like her truck was heading in a certain direction, drawing the bikers off her real path. It was risky and time-consuming, but it might work. She also considered seeking out local help, but out here allies were few and far between. She doubted she'd come across a rancher or hiker equipped to deal with armed gang members. Deciding she couldn't linger forever, Evelyn fired up the truck. She navigated deeper into the canyon, using slow, careful driving to avoid attracting attention. Each turn revealed new rock formations, some narrow passages, and even a few cave-like indentations in the canyon walls. The rising sun gradually illuminated her path, but that also meant she'd be more visible from above. Eventually, she emerged onto a slightly wider plateau tucked behind a high rock ridge. From this vantage point, she could see the desert floor stretching out beyond the canyon. The winding trail below led back to the main road, a potential exit. She cut the engine and scanned the area through a pair of old binoculars she kept in the glove compartment. Sure enough, she spotted movement on the road, a cluster of motorcycles, perhaps 4 or 5. They looked like they were grouped near an intersection, possibly waiting for any sign of her. Even from this distance, she could sense their tension. She cursed under her breath. They were covering the most direct route to the next town. Evelyn sighed. A direct confrontation against multiple armed bikers was a bad idea. Yet she also had a responsibility to deliver the supplies. If she didn't reach the settlement soon, they might go without essential goods: water, food, medical provisions. Moreover, letting this gang terrorize the highways would endanger others too. She returned to the truck and popped open the glove box again, pulling out a crumpled map. Her finger traced a secondary route, an older road that wound through the foothills. It was longer, more rugged, but it might allow her to circumvent the bikers' blockade. The question was whether they were also smart enough to monitor that path. For now, time was of the essence. She decided to try the foothills road, moving quietly and carefully, using every bit of her training to remain undetected. If push came to shove, she'd show them exactly who they were dealing with. The foothills route was less a proper road and more a series of disjointed dirt trails winding between clusters of rocks and low-lying shrubs. Evelyn felt every bump and rut as she guided the truck with caution, mindful of any sign that might indicate the bikers were lying in wait. The desert sun rose higher, and with it came the searing heat that sapped energy and strained engines. She checked the truck's temperature gauge. It edged toward the higher side, but still within safe limits. She'd need to watch it closely. The last thing she wanted was to overheat in the middle of nowhere while being pursued by a hostile gang. The trail snaked upward to a small ridge overlooking a broad valley. Before cresting the ridge, Evelyn halted and stepped out, keeping a low profile as she inched to the vantage point. From there, she scanned the valley floor below with her binoculars. She saw no immediate sign of the bikers, no dust trails from motorcycles, no glint of chrome in the sun. Her shoulders relaxed a fraction. Maybe her detour was working. Then, just as she was about to turn back, a flicker of movement caught her eye to the west. Zooming in, she spotted a lone biker weaving through the scattered brush, occasionally pausing to look around. A scout, perhaps? Evelyn mentally traced his path. He seemed to be paralleling the dirt route she planned to take, likely searching for any fresh tire marks. Her gaze swept the horizon. If there was one scout, there might be more. The gang seemed methodical in their search. A sense of urgency gnawed at her. Returning to the truck, she started down the other side of the ridge, trying to keep as much terrain between herself and the scout as possible. The trail narrowed, hugging a rocky outcrop. Evelyn held her breath as she rounded a corner, the truck's tires crunching over loose gravel. The towering rock formations offered some cover, but also limited her visibility. After several tense minutes, she reached a flatter stretch of ground. Time was ticking. The next settlement lay still many miles away. She had to balance stealth with speed. Too slow and the bikers might catch up. Too fast and she risked mechanical failure or drawing attention. Her mind drifted to an operation she'd undertaken in Afghanistan years ago. Infiltration behind enemy lines using a mountainous route to avoid detection. The principle remained the same. Stay alert, move carefully, make no unnecessary noise. She found herself almost slipping into that old mindset, scanning the landscape with hyper-focused detail. A rustling sound to her left jolted her. She braked hard, eyes darting. A desert fox scampered away behind a boulder. Heart pounding, she couldn't help a half smile at her own jumpiness. But caution had kept her alive before, and she wasn't about to dismiss it. She continued along the trail until it reconnected with a dry wash, a path of packed sand that once channeled floodwaters. The wash seemed wide enough for the truck, so she took it, hoping it would mask her tire tracks in the sandy terrain. The canyon walls rose again on either side, forming a corridor of twisted, striated rock. In that semi-enclosed space, the temperature soared. Sweat gathered on Evelyn's brow, and she paused long enough to take a swig of water. She contemplated whether to press on through the wash or climb to higher ground for another look. The sense of being followed pressed on her mind. In the end, she decided to keep moving. The more distance she put between herself and the main roads, the harder it would be for the bikers to pinpoint her exact location. And if they did find her, at least she'd have the advantage of choosing the battlefield. An hour later, the desert heat felt relentless. Evelyn's arms were slick with sweat, and the truck's air conditioning struggled to provide relief. She worried about fuel consumption, too. The rough terrain was guzzling gay, and she had only so much in reserve. If she got stuck out here, she'd be in a dire situation. Just as she rounded another bend in the dry wash, something glinted ahead. She slowed, hard hammering. It looked like a metallic object partially buried in the sand. Could it be a piece of debris? Or something intentionally placed? Evelyn cautiously approached. The object turned out to be the remains of an old sign, rusted and pitted. She could barely make out the words, "Danger, restricted area." Another piece of the sign lay cracked on the ground, referencing a defunct mining operation. She glanced at her map. Indeed, it showed a cluster of old mines in this region. With a frown, she contemplated the possibility of open shafts or tunnels that could be used as hideouts, or as traps. Still, she pressed on, steering around the sign. Up ahead, the wash branched into two paths. She studied the map again. One route led closer to the old mining sites, the other snaked back toward the highway. It was a gamble either way. The bikers might be staking out the highway, but venturing into abandoned mines carried its own set of dangers. Her radio crackled with static. She'd left it on the standard CB channel in case someone else was out here. She grabbed the microphone and spoke softly. "Any travelers out here?" Over. Static replied, "No voices, no signals." She tried another frequency, but got nothing. It wasn't surprising. Cell coverage was non-existent, and CB traffic was sparse in these remote parts. Choosing the mining route, Evelyn reasoned that the bikers might not expect her to head into old, unstable territory. The path grew rougher, forcing her to navigate boulders, gullies, and patches of deep sand. More than once, she had to back up and find a different angle to get the truck through. Each minute that passed felt like an eternity, but she pressed on with grim determination. Finally, she spotted the remnants of a chain-link fence and a dilapidated shack that must have once served as an office for the mine. Parking the truck behind a rock formation, she carefully scouted the area on foot. The fence was mostly collapsed, and the mine entrance was a dark hole in the hillside, reinforced with rotting timbers. A faded sign warned of toxic gas, unstable conditions. Evelyn wasn't keen on going inside, but the entrance could serve as temporary cover if she needed to hide her truck. Then again, a collapsing shaft could be a death trap. As she weighed her options, she heard a faint rumble echoing off the canyon walls. Motorcycles? She hurried to a vantage point. She saw them far off, two bikes glinting in the sun, moving across the desert floor. They seemed to be heading in her general direction. Her stomach tightened. She needed to decide quickly. Making a snap judgment, she ran back to the truck and started it up, guiding it through the broken fence and inside the perimeter of the old mine site. She parked near the shack, behind a rusted piece of mining equipment. It offered partial concealment. Then she grabbed her rifle case from the back, an old bolt action she sometimes used for varmint control, and quickly assembled it. If they came closer, she might have to defend her position. She set herself up, scanning the desert with the rifle scope. Her heart pounded as she waited, the scorching sun bearing witness to this high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Evelyn waited in the suffocating heat, her rifle braced against a chunk of old mining equipment for stability. The desert wind kicked up dust devils in the distance, but her eyes remained fixed on the horizon. The two bikers advanced slowly, weaving around boulders and shrubs. Whether they'd spotted her truck's tracks or were just exploring, she couldn't be certain. Her finger rested gently beside the trigger guard, not on it. She didn't want to shoot unless absolutely necessary. In her old life, she'd learned the value of restraint as much as precision, yet her heart thumped erratically, adrenaline surging in her veins. Being hunted was a raw, primal sensation. The bikers paused near a cluster of rocks, apparently consulting in each other. They scanned the terrain, their heads turning side to side. One raised a pair of binoculars to his eyes, sweeping the area. Evelyn held her breath, staying perfectly still, her body pressed against the rusted metal for cover. The intense desert glare might help hide her in the shadows, but she couldn't count on that forever. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an hour. Then one biker swung his leg off the motorcycle and began walking directly toward the mine fence. His hand hovered near his waist, maybe on a firearm, though Evelyn couldn't see clearly. The other stayed on his bike, engine idling, ready for a quick getaway or to provide covering fire. Evelyn's pulse accelerated. If he got too close, he'd spot the truck or her footprints. She glanced around, weighing her options. If she fired a warning shot, it would give away her position, but might scare them off. On the other hand, if they found her anyway, she'd lose the element of surprise. The biker advanced to within 30 yards of the fence. He peered through a gap in the chain link, eyes narrowed. She was partially hidden behind the old mining machine, but the truck's silhouette might be visible if he looked from the right angle. In that fraught moment, the biker's radio crackled. He spoke into it, the words indistinct. Then he turned and waved to his partner, who revved the motorcycle loudly. Before Evelyn could fully process the shift, the man spun around and hurried back to his bike. They exchanged a few quick words, then both roared off, kicking up a plume of dust behind them. Evelyn exhaled shakily. She didn't know why they left so suddenly, maybe a call from the rest of the gang, or they'd concluded this site was too hazardous. Regardless, she had a reprieve. But for how long? The tension in her body slowly eased, leaving her with trembling limbs. She disassembled the rifle to stow it back in its case. The air around her felt stifling, thick with the promise of more trouble. She considered pressing on. If two bikers were out scouting, the rest of the gang might not be far behind. They could be coordinating a sweep of the region. A new plan began to form in her mind, something bolder. Maybe she could sabotage their bikes if she found their camp, or at least sow confusion among their ranks. Even if they had superior numbers, she had experience in small-scale guerrilla tactics, setting traps, striking from cover, disappearing into the terrain. If she kept running, they'd keep chasing. Perhaps it was time to flip the script. For a moment, the old soldier in her stirred fully awake. This wasn't just survival now, it was strategy. Sweltering heat and a dull headache throbbed behind Evelyn's temples as she surveyed the derelict mine site for anything useful. Inside the half-collapsed shack, she found rusted tools scattered on a rickety table, a crowbar, a hammer, some nails, and coils of decrepit rope. Most of it was too far gone to be reliable. She also discovered a few dusty lanterns and a can of kerosene. She pocketed the matches, mentally cataloging the kerosene as a potential diversion tool. The day wore on, the sun now high in the sky. She decided to act before the bikers regrouped. Loading the essentials back into her truck, she scanned the perimeter one last time to ensure no one was watching. Then she set off, driving slowly and sticking to the rocky edges to avoid leaving obvious tire prints in the sand. Her plan was to find higher ground for better reconnaissance. A small plateau near the southern edge of the foothills seemed promising. If she could see the bikers' movements from up there, she might devise a way to bypass or confront them on her own terms. By late afternoon, she reached the base of the plateau. The climb ahead looked daunting, a steep incline littered with loose rock and prickly desert plants. She parked the truck in a concealed spot behind a rocky outcrop, grabbed her binoculars and some water, then began the ascent on foot. The climb was a grueling test of endurance in the punishing heat. Each step sent pebbles sliding behind her. Her throat felt parched despite the water she sipped intermittently. Memories of intense training exercises surfaced, carrying heavy packs in arid terrains, rationing water, pushing past physical limits. She gritted her teeth, determined to reach the top. When she finally emerged onto the plateau, the view was breathtaking and intimidating. The desert stretched infinitely in all directions, shimmering in the heat. She crouched near the edge, using a low bush for concealment, and raised her binoculars. To the northeast, she spotted a dusty trail leading toward the main highway. Tiny specks moved in the distance, likely more bikers. Further south, she could barely make out a settlement, her intended destination. Between that settlement and her vantage point lay miles of open desert, with no obvious cover. If the bikers decided to patrol that expanse, she'd be in trouble. Evelyn panned the binoculars slowly, pausing when she noticed a cluster of shapes near a rugged outcropping. It looked like a makeshift camp, a few tents, motorcycles parked in a line, and figures milling about. Her heart sank. This had to be the gang's staging area. They had chosen a location that allowed them to monitor both the highway and the side trails. She counted at least 8 bikes and more than a dozen people. Some sat on folding chairs, others tinkered with their rides. There were also vehicles that looked like off-road ATVs, likely used to traverse the rough desert terrain. If that entire group mobilized to come after her, she'd be heavily outnumbered. A knot formed in her stomach. Delivering supplies to the settlement would be nearly impossible if she couldn't slip past that camp. She mulled over the idea of a diversion, maybe using the kerosene to start a small brush fire on one side, drawing their attention away. Or she could quietly disable a few of their bikes if she could get close without being detected. Yet each plan involved tremendous risk. A direct assault was out of the question. She had neither the manpower nor the firepower for that. She needed cunning and stealth. Her old Delta Force training hammered home the value of patience, reconnaissance, and striking with precision. She lowered the binoculars, eyes fixed on the distant figures. Time was running short. The settlement needed those supplies, and the bikers were tightening their grip on the region. A line from her past echoed in her mind. Sometimes the best defense is to make the enemy worry about their own weaknesses. Evelyn spent the next hour carefully studying the biker camp's routines. Through the binoculars, she noted when some members left on their bikes and when they returned. She observed the perimeter, where they parked their vehicles and where a pair of guards seemed to linger. After a while, she detected a pattern. Around dusk, a few of them would gather near a large bonfire pit, presumably to eat or socialize. Guards switched shifts around that time, leaving a short window of less vigilance. As evening approached, she descended from the plateau, her mind set on a plan. She'd wait until nightfall and then attempt a stealth incursion. The goal? Sabotage enough of their bikes or ATVs to slow them down. Even if they discovered her afterward, they wouldn't be able to mount an immediate large-scale chase. That might give her the chance to slip away with her truck and reach the settlement. Back at her hidden truck, Evelyn prepared methodically. She packed a small kit of tools, including a screwdriver, multi-tool pliers, and a small hammer. She also retrieved the kerosene and matches in case she needed a quick distraction. Grabbing her trusty sidearm, she strapped on a thigh holster that she hadn't worn in a long time. The weight of the gun felt both foreign and intimately familiar. Night fell with a gradual dimming of the sky, turning from blood orange to deep purple, and finally settling into a star-filled blackness. In the desert, darkness arrived swiftly, bringing with it a sharp drop in temperature. Evelyn wore a light jacket to ward off the chill, then made her way on foot across the rocky landscape toward the biker camp. She moved silently, each step carefully placed to avoid crunching, loose gravel. The wind rustled the sparse desert plants, masking some of her sound. She paused frequently to scan with her binoculars, making sure no roving patrols lurked nearby. Adrenaline coursed through her, heightening her senses. After nearly an hour of cautious approach, she reached a vantage point behind a large boulder just outside the faint glow of the camp's bonfire. She peered around the edge. Music blared from a portable speaker. A few bikers drank from cans, their laughter echoing in the night. She counted about 6 near the fire. Others might be inside tents or standing guard at the perimeter. She spotted the row of motorcycles and ATVs about 50 yards away from the bonfire. They were partially illuminated by a few flickering floodlights powered by a generator. Two men stood nearby, talking quietly, occasionally glancing at the vehicles. Evelyn needed them to move or be distracted before she could sabotage anything. A sudden commotion drew her attention. One of the bikers stumbled toward the bonfire, apparently drunk. He raised his arms, shouting something about showing them how to party. The others whooped and hollered. The two men guarding the vehicles turned to watch, momentarily absorbed by the spectacle. Seizing the opportunity, Evelyn slipped around the boulder, crouching low. Her heart pounded so loud she feared they'd hear it. Step by step, she closed the distance. Once she reached the far side of the vehicles, she ducked behind an ATV, shielded from the guard's line of sight. Working quickly yet quietly, she used her multi-tool to remove crucial components. Spark plugs, wires, anything that would render the machines useless without an obvious sign of sabotage. Time seemed to crawl. Every scrape of metal on metal sounded deafening in her ears. She moved from one vehicle to another, taking care not to knock anything for. At one point, a guard glanced in her direction. She froze, pressing herself flat against an ATV. He muttered something, then turned his attention back to the drunken show near the bonfire. Evelyn exhaled silently, continuing her work. If all went well, the bikers wouldn't realize what she'd done until they tried to start their vehicles. By then, she'd be long gone. When all was said and done, our unassuming delivery driver not only protected the innocent, but also reclaimed a sense of purpose she thought was long lost. By harnessing her special ops background and innate compassion, she outwitted the biker outlaws and ensured vital supplies reached those who needed them most. In the end, the settlement returned to its quiet routine. The desert roads opened once more, and the unstoppable spirit of human resilience shone brightly. From a personal viewpoint, this story is a powerful reminder that hidden strengths can surface in the harshest moments. It's a testament to how hope, grit, and unity can conquer intimidation. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the bikers got what they deserved? How would you have handled the final showdown? Comment below to join the discussion, and don't forget to subscribe for more exciting tales coming your way.